Welcome to the Sunshine Parenting Podcast. My name is Audrey Monkey, and I am your host. This is episode 1. I'll be talking with Dr. Christine Carter, answering a parenting question from a listener about how to help her child deal with unkind kids in their community. And I'll also be sharing an activity idea to try with your family. Christine Carter is a sociologist and senior fellow at UC Berkeley's Greater Good Science Center. She is the best-selling author of Raising Happiness and The Sweet Spot, How to Find Your Groove at Work and Home. She draws on the latest scientific research and distills information for regular people like us. She is a sought-after keynote speaker and executive coach, and she writes an award-winning blog at christinecarter.com. I have highlighted and dog-eared profusely in both of Christine's books. I first got introduced to her through a comment on a Facebook post I made about another parenting book back in 2011. My friend Jack commented that Christine's book, Raising Happiness, had changed his family's life in a profoundly positive way. I immediately got on Amazon and ordered my copy, and I was inspired by Christine's simple advice and ideas for having a happier and more peaceful family life. I reached out to Christine to see if she could speak at an upcoming camp conference I was helping plan. She wasn't available for the conference, but we struck up a conversation about camp, and she ended up sending her daughters to my camp and then getting very involved as a trainer for our parent and counselor groups over the past 6 years. She has been providing training for our counselors on topics ranging from teaching kids gratitude, kindness, to our last summer where she talked about how we can help kids grow their grit while they're at camp. Her training is the highlight of our counselor training session each year. I am thrilled to welcome Dr. Christine Carter to this first episode of the Sunshine Parenting Podcast. She has become a mentor and friend over these past 6 years, and I'm thrilled to have her on the show. All right. Well, so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, Christine. I'm so glad to be talking to you today.
I'm so happy to be here. You're one of my favorite people to talk to.
You are one of mine, too. And one of the things I was thinking about as anticipating our conversation was how you're the one author who's written a book that I really, really like, who I actually know your kids and have seen in person that they are turning out really well.
Thank you. I have to agree. I think my kids are pretty awesome, too.
So it's interesting because you've studied all this stuff and you've been writing about it for so many years, but now you're actually seeing, now that your girls are teenagers, that some of these things that you wrote about so many years ago are actually working.
Yeah, it's true. I didn't really realize it when I was writing Raising Happiness, that it's kind of a bold move to write a parenting book while your kids are so little. You know, I mean, I was like basically writing the manual I needed for myself, taking all of the science that I was reading about as a sociologist and putting it into action. But yeah, so it works. I'm happy to report. I didn't, there was no part of me that thought that it wasn't going to work because it's all evidence-based. It's not like this is my opinion, but,
Right.
It has stood the test of time.
Yes.
And multiple children.
Yes. So we were talking earlier about how I first read your book back in 2011, and my kids were a lot younger back then, just like yours were. I think you said in the book they were 6 and 8 when you were writing. And I just pulled it back out because I wanted to look at it again. And I love The Sweet Spot, your newer book. And I want to talk to you about that another time. But I thought that for this podcast, I'd really want to just focus on Raising Happiness because it was really a profoundly influential book for me. So the whole title is Raising Happiness, 10 Simple Steps for More Joyful Kids and Happier Parents. And I was thinking back before I pulled it back off my shelf. I was trying to remember what I remembered most from the book. And there were 2 things that I remembered, and I just am curious, when you're looking back, because you said you haven't really looked at it lately, is there anything from there that you remember vividly, or do you want me to share mine first?
Share yours first. That'll be fun.
So the main thing that I remembered, and it has gone over and over in my mind so many times over the years, is the very first tip, which is put on your own oxygen mask first.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I was thinking that your book, The Sweet Spot, that's all about putting on your own oxygen mask.
Yeah, the follow-up book is about that one tip. And I have to say, as a coach, both for parents and executives and all sorts of people, that's the main thing, right? We become so much more focused on our children and on everybody else's needs that we forget about ourselves, and then we become faint from lack of oxygen, and we're kind of useless, right? So it's really about shoring ourselves up so that we can fulfill our potential, whether it's in a career or as parents, or whatever it is we want to do, all of those things. We have to take care of ourselves first. And I think for parents, it's just so important, because kids are so much more likely to do as you do than they are to do what you tell them to do. So you can spend, all kinds of time and energy trying to figure out what to teach your kids, and it doesn't really matter if you're not doing it yourself. If you want happy kids, you got to figure out happiness for yourself.
Oh my gosh, so true. And I feel like as I look around, it's the message we all really need more now. I don't even know. Every year we need this message, this reminder. Yeah. I see so many parents who just seem frazzled and anxious and so unhappy as they go about this parenting. And it's so important that we step back and say, hey, wait, what are we doing here? It's not about pouring ourselves out completely for our kids so that they see a frazzled adult whose whole life just revolves around them.
Right. Absolutely. And the methods that we use to cope with the things that are making us feel so busy and overwhelmed are the methods that our kids will learn to cope with those same social forces. So I think it's right? We're getting busier and more overwhelmed, and the world changes, society changes, and we need to adapt, ways to cope that will work for our kids as well. And so, how do we cope with busyness? We complain about being busy, and we, sort of blame it on other people. And we have all these really ineffective ways. We try and multitask. That doesn't work, makes us more stressed. And so then our kids, learn that, not to prioritize, not to say no, to just complain a lot if they're real busy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So that was one of the things I remembered. The other thing that I really remembered, because it's always been something very important to me, is family dinner and having that family, that concentrated time. And I've kind of written and thought about that extensively, because it gets hard as your kids get older. So I'm wondering, where are you on the whole family dinner thing at this stage of your kids' ages?
Yeah, so Molly and Fiona, who I wrote about in Raising Happiness, are, how old are they? They are 13 and 15. And then I have stepkids that live with us who are 14 and 16. And so this is, they all have their things. And at dinner time, right? They're busy. Mm-hmm. But we still have dinner together 6 nights a week.
Awesome.
Right?
That's amazing,
6 nights
actually.
A week. So I know. But we've become very, very flexible about it. So sometimes it sort of falls apart, and it won't be the 5 or 6 of us, right? So one of my kids is at Thatcher in boarding school, as you know, and so she's not with us. So usually it's 5 of us, but sometimes the soccer practice goes late, and so we'll do 3 and 2, or we'll do. But the key, or we'll wait. We eat now that the kids are older. We wait longer, and it's not that the kids eat better; right. They don't, right? When we wait, but it's that's the time that we have. The kids really prioritize it too, right? They get it. They understand that this is something that has come to be of great value to them, and they work hard to preserve dinner time too. And on the weekends we still have dinner together, but their friends come to our house, which to me has been really valuable part of the whole thing, right? Instead of going elsewhere. And a lot of times I'll invite their parents too, right? It's a way to get to know these families that I otherwise wouldn't know, because our kids are all in different schools. They're all over the place. It means that I feel a little bit like a food service industry, right? I'm cooking for a lot of people a lot of the time, and I've really, really lowered the bar on what is acceptable dinner party food, right? Like, we have a lot of people coming over. I like get out a lasagna from Costco, and I don't even like put it in my own dish. Right? Like,
don't even have to pretend anymore.
It's a low bar for somebody who likes to cook, but to me, that's what makes it possible.
Right. Well, I just love that you're still doing it. We've kind of evolved the same way with this, in like this week in particular. On Sunday, I looked at the schedule and we had soccer practices and tennis and this, that, and the other. So we've had dinner at 7:30 every night this week, because the kids are old enough where you can eat dinner late together. But it's something that one of my kids mentioned, we're the only people who have dinner together. I don't think we are.
I know.
I don't think we are, but I think it is, unfortunately, becoming less of a normal practice. And as you write in Raising Happiness, such an important thing. So I was re-inspired by rereading that again about just how important it is to carve out that time, because for us in our family, it's pretty much the only time that we're all chatting together and have time to catch up and share some things, because otherwise people are going a lot of different directions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like it's where a lot of the learning gets passed on too, right? Like, so when your kids are really little, we know that they're learning words and how to have conversations, and where you can explicitly teach them a gratitude practice, and there's a lot that happens. And as the kids are getting older, it's just really, really interesting to see. Like, I'm very conscious of what they're learning at dinner time, and we're going through the college process with one kid, and in a way, it's a way of teaching them about happiness, right? Like, who are you, and what do you want? As we are doing that at dinner time with the oldest, the younger ones are asking themselves the same questions. Who am I?
Right.
What do I want? What's important to me in my life, right? And it's not like about, well, are your grades good enough to go to Dartmouth? It's more about, like, what do you really want in your life, right? And getting past the shallower answers that are just, people assumed. So having that time every single day to just dig a little bit deeper on these things, I think is important. My best advice about dinner time, well, I have a lot of advice about dinner time, but one of the things that people say to me, they're like, oh, your dinners sound so nice, or when I come to your house, it's just like so much more sitcom-ish, and that's because I structure our dinner time. Right? Like, I lead the conversations. And this is very annoying to my entire family at times, and it makes it more work for me, right? Like, I don't just sit down and eat.
Right.
But it's that kind of thought. It's not, first of all, it's not that hard, right? I just think of one question. We do Gold Arrow Camp, High-Low Buffalo, probably once a week, because it's just fun to. But I have a trick, right, where I will not ask them the same thing, or I'll say, okay, today we're going to talk about whether you'd rather live in a city or out in the country, and why. And I'm thinking about that because Macy's got to figure out where she wants to visit for colleges, right?
Right.
But then it becomes fodder for this more structured discussion that everybody else gets to participate in.
Right. And I don't know if you've found, but they sort of, because I do a similar thing at my house, and, sometimes people are kind of like, oh, what's going on tonight? But they all secretly really like it. Yeah.
And occasionally one of them will slip, like if I'm just sort of exhausted and I'm just relaxing for a second before I start the conversation, one of them will be like, okay, so is this are we going to do our gratitudes, or what are we, like, what's the plan? Do you know what I mean? And I'm like, oh, well, why
Right.
don't you lead tonight? They're like, no, that's okay, you lead. Yeah, like,
Oh, but
it
isn't
just
that
depends on where they are.
Oh, but see, that is the
Yeah,
awesome thing. That's where you see exactly what you talk about in your book, that it's all about just these habits and things that you do that they are catching on to and hopefully will, even when they're out in the world, continue to do. Reminds me, we have this group of counselors who are all in their 20s. They've graduated from college. They get together once a week for dinner just to have, they call it family dinner, even though they're just family at boot
aw.
camp. And they share their highs and lows from the week. So they do sort of a structured conversation, just a bunch of 20-something-year-olds. And it warms my heart to hear that they're practicing those things that are going to help them and their families be happier their whole lives.
I know, those counselors are going to be the best parents ever.
I know, so fun. Okay, so we don't have too much more time, so I want to ask you. I talked to you about this before. I was doing an online parenting workshop, and one of the parents asked about how to help their child deal with unkind kids and kind of unkind things going on at school. And I know you've talked a
Mm-hmm.
lot about kindness and promoting kindness and modeling kindness for your own kids, which, we have some control over what happens in our own homes and with our children. But once they get out in the world, unfortunately, there's a lot of people who are not kind. So what is your advice
Mm-hmm.
for this parent and for other parents when dealing with how advising their children on how to handle unkind people out in the world?
Yeah, so I've definitely dealt with this with all my kids, and it is hard. So there are a couple of things that I try and help them keep in mind, and really what I'm trying to do is give them their own sense of personal power that's positive, in the face of a situation which might make them feel otherwise quite powerless. Right, watching somebody be mean to them or to somebody else can really be a problem, for them, can really sort of make us feel powerless. And so we want to give them that power back. They can see where they have power. Now, the obvious thing is to sort of not be a bystander, to call out the unkind behavior. In my experience, this is really hard for kids, particularly once they get into middle school. They're afraid that if somebody else is being teased, for example, if they step in and intervene in some way, they will then be the next target, right? They've been well trained by the unkind kids not to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to give them other tools as well that are maybe more, are more rudimentary, right? That are maybe a little bit less active in the actual moment. And the first thing is to give them a way. It's called cognitive reappraisal. You would never use that term with your kids, but that's what the researchers call it. Where give them a way to look at the unkind behavior that is actually probably more true and quite different from the way that they see it. And the goal is so that it doesn't trigger fear in them. Somebody's being unkind to them or somebody else, and it triggers a pretty big fear response, which is really stressful for kids and doesn't necessarily lead to them doing the right thing in the face of that. But if we can teach them to see that all unkind behavior comes from a place of real pain, so all of a sudden they can see the unkind person's pain. And instead of just feeling afraid of them, they might also feel compassion. So, and compassion is a very powerful, positive emotion. It has the opposite effect on our nervous system as fear. So, helping them break down unkind behavior, right? Like really spending a bunch of time talking with our kids about that person, about what they might be going through. Imagine what type of pain they might be in. Starting with, I in a weird sort of a way, like I was going to say I love it. I don't love it, but every time siblings are unkind to each other, it's the perfect opportunity to help them see their own pain. Like, so if I call you a name, why did I do it? Because I was wounded, right? So to see that your own unkind behavior always comes from a place of pain, right? Versus, and that doesn't mean that it's okay at all, right? But how we feel is always okay, right? So the pain is not that person's fault. They're not in control necessarily of the pain. The pain is neither here nor there, right? Like it's neither good. It's neither good nor bad, actually, right? It just is something that is there in yourself or in a person. It's the behavior that comes out of it is, of course, something we control and is good or bad. But when people can see beyond the behavior, and this goes for us as parents, right? Whenever a kid is misbehaving, practicing seeing the pain or the emotion behind the behavior, and then pointing that out to them. So that's the first of two ways. I sort of help kids, and then they feel more powerful, right? Like if you can feel compassion, that gives you a sense that you can actually help the situation, right? That you can see that, these kids who are acting out and are unkind really are, often quite wounded. And sometimes the kids, why, right? They know, oh, well, their parents are getting divorced and the dad just left and it's horrible, right? Like they don't, or whatever. The kids often know. Sometimes they won't, and it's actually none of your business. Why? Like it's not about helping the kids understand why. It's helping them understand what. What are they feeling, right? And if you can see them in the same way that you might sometimes be wounded, then you can see that the unkind behavior is just a poor decision that they're making in the face of terrible emotions that are very difficult for them to deal with. Okay, so that's way one. Way two is to do loving kindness meditations with them. So the traditional Buddhist meditation called Metta, that I did write about that in Raising Happiness, where you wishes to all different types of people in your life. So you start with, people that you feel grateful for, and the people close to you that you love, and then people that you just sort of feel neutral about. And you, one of the last ones that you do is you send loving thoughts. So like, may you be happy, may you be healthy and safe, may you be free from suffering, things like that. Like you just pick a few phrases. There's lots of traditional ones. The ones I just said are pretty traditional, but like just you send well wishes. And the last thing that you do is you send it to somebody who you're really having a difficult time with. And it replaces that fear with positive emotion, once again, right? Love and kindness. And it really puts you in a position of power, right? Like if you're a big enough person to send love to somebody who's bullying you, it really gives you a different perspective. And in my experience, it really calms kids and helps them cope with difficult situations much better, right? In the moment, but then later they come at it like, I can still love you even though you're in such pain and you're so mean, Being so mean,
Oh, so
I'm above it.
So good. Yeah, I think it's in step 8 is where you have the loving kindness, where you talk about that in Raising Happiness. It's so good. And, as you're talking and everything that you write about in parenting, it's also just good for people in life, in, how we as adults can respond to unkind. I mean, isn't this all just, again, we can model this for our kids, because unfortunately our kids are going to grow up to be adults who are going to have bosses in different situations where they're going to be able to have to face and learn how to deal with unkindness. So it's actually almost our responsibility to help them as kids learn how to best approach that. So this is all so great. Oh my gosh, your wisdom is, of course, perfect, and I know will help the person who asked, as well as a lot of other people who I'm sure are dealing with the same thing with their kids.
Oh, well, it's my pleasure. It's so fun to talk to you.
I know. I love it. Okay. So I really enjoy your whole website and your blog posts. I look forward to getting my Tuesday tip every week. I like how they're just like short, quick reminders about things that I can do. Can you tell people what you have going on right now, the classes you're offering, what you're working on, and all that?
Yeah, sure. So ChristineCarter.com, you can get the whole scoop. So my latest book is called The Sweet Spot: How to Accomplish More by Doing Less. And so it's focused on that first step of taking care of yourself. And if you're not like a book person, I have an online class which goes much deeper. It's called The Science of Finding Flow. And it's really just about finding ease in your life, and not feeling so busy and overwhelmed all the time. I have to say that's definitely the number one complaint of all the people that I coach. They just feel like they can't do it all, and they've been trying. So I put together a whole class so that I can coach hundreds of people at a time on the same thing, and getting good feedback on that. That's fun. And then on the Raising Happiness front, I'm redoing all my Raising Happiness online classes. So that won't be available until probably the new year. But once those reach, if you're interested in anything that we've talked about today, I will have an online class that will be self-paced, that you can take yourself through learning online.
Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. I didn't know that you were doing that. And that will be so fun for people to get to kind of revisit Raising Happiness. And I'm really excited.
Yeah.
I think of all the people that I often look back to, refer to, you're definitely at the top of my list. I think I'm always linking to something you've written or something like that. So I'm a huge fan, as you know, and of you and your kids. And I'm so grateful that you took the time to come on my podcast and talk to me about Raising Happiness and the other things that you have going on. So thank you so much for being here today, Christine.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's great to talk to you.
I so enjoyed talking with Christine today, and I hope you enjoyed listening as well. For notes about our conversation and links to her website and other issues that we talked about today, visit my website at sunshine-parenting.com. My parenting tip for this week, something that you can try at home, is to organize some kind of structured conversation at your family dinner. Just like Christine and I talked about, you can have it be something like highs and lows from the day, something you're grateful for, or maybe just a fun question that everyone can answer. I've found these conversations to be a great way to get the conversation flowing and to create some more connection during our dinner hour. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Sunshine Parenting Podcast. I've been really working on being more mindful and living in the moment with my kids and family. And so today I'm going to leave you with an inspirational quote from Jon Kabat-Zinn. The little things, the little moments, they aren't little, they are your life.